Joining us by phone tonight is Christina Greer, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Fordham University. Professor, should we be surprised by President Obama's endorsement of Bill de Blasio? Does it affect this race at all? You have the first word.
Well, I don't think we should necessarily be surprised. I think it is a show of Democratic unity. We know that this president and Mayor Bloomberg have had a somewhat tense relationship at times, and this is a way to make sure that we have a Democrat in Gracie Mansion after 20 years. I mean, the last Democratic mayor we've had has been David Dinkins. So I think for this particular president, it behooves him to at least come out and make sure that Democratic voters in New York know that he is supporting Bill de Blasio, and these sort of new allegations about Cuba and, radical politics are not necessarily important for the Democratic Party right now because they have larger issues that they want to address as far as the needs and wants of voters in New York.
Let's stick with Obama for just 1 second. I want to get to the rest of that in just a moment. But in 2009, Obama waited until mid-October to endorse Bill Thompson in his race against Mayor Bloomberg. Many Democrats considered it too late and lukewarm. Why the change this time around, do you think? Why mid-September?
Well, I mean, 2009 was a very different election. You had a mayor who was not only an incumbent, but someone who was spending $110 million on the books. It pretty much was pretty certain for a lot of people in political circles that Mayor Bloomberg would still be the mayor in 2009 going into 2010. So it didn't really add any political value for the president to jump in. It's very rare that presidents actually get in the middle of these types of local elections. We know that the mayoral races for New York City are slightly different in the sense that the mayor of New York is in many ways a global position, not just financially, but as far as a symbol for our economic strength as well as our diversity as a nation. So, maybe Obama waited a little too late back then. I mean, this year, we still haven't seen a final count from the Board of Elections. So it is interesting that the president has decided to essentially say, well, even though we don't have a final count from the Board of Elections, I'm still going to make the call that de Blasio will be the Democratic nominee with over 40%. And let's move forward as a Democratic, big D Democratic Party, and so we can win this election in November.
How should New Yorkers be reacting to the fact that it's taken the Board of Elections now 2 weeks to count 700,000 votes? A spokesperson says results should be coming out tomorrow, 2 weeks after the hope,
right? Well, I mean, the thing is, unfortunately, there's just a widespread lack of faith in this Board of Elections, right? We know that we've had to use the old, quasi-antiquated machines because they were very clear that they wouldn't be able to recalibrate the newer machines in time in case there was a runoff. So September, October, and November would be essentially too much for them to handle. We are the largest city in the country. One would hope and one would think that the Board of Elections would have enough people on staff to handle something of this magnitude and importance. So it does look poorly on not only the Board of Elections, but New York City as a whole. So it's somewhat disappointing, but there's nothing that we can do in the sense that we've seen this Board of Elections consistently come up a little short in the eyes of many voters. And this is yet another example of that behavior.
Politicians are the ones who would need to change it. I think the politicians like the fact that the system is a little broken. They have maybe more control over it, my 2 cents. Republican Joe Lhota and Independence Party candidate Adolfo Carrion, as we talked about briefly, are trying to gain some footing in this race. Both are getting more vocal with their critiques of Bill de Blasio, the front runner in the polls, if you believe the polls. What do you expect to see them doing to chip away at his lead in the coming days and weeks?
Well, keep in mind, Bill de Blasio wasn't vetted in the same ways as, say, Christine Quinn and Anthony Weiner, and not even Bill Thompson to a certain extent. So this is a way to try and find things that maybe weren't highlighted in the primary by his Democratic rivals. I mean, for the most part of the primary race, Bill de Blasio was probably in fourth place, so most people weren't really paying attention to him and scrutinizing him the way that they will now that he's the Democratic nominee. So they'll find inconsistencies in his voting patterns and ideologies when he was on city council. They will probably try and, drudge up things from his past. associations that he's had with particular individuals, either politically or financially. And so those are the things that Carrion and Loda will most likely do, but that could also backfire on them in the sense that, New Yorkers have clearly stated, the 20% who actually did turn out to vote, they're concerned about education, housing, and the larger welfare of themselves in the city. And so many people might see this as a way to deal with the past when de Blasio has been very successful in convincing New Yorkers that we need to look forward to the future, and he's the future of New York.
Christina Greer, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Fordham.